Hey everyone, welcome back to the Brain Soul Success Show. I am here with my good friend. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for you to meet Dr. Titus Chiu. He's a two-time #1 best-selling author. He is an international speaker. He's a holistic brain expert, and he specializes in healing concussions naturally. Wow. He has passion for empowering the health-conscious people with the knowledge, the insights, the practical actions needed to really heal their brains and reclaim their lives after concussion. He uses advanced brain testing, state-of-the-art treatment technologies, and his clinically proven concussion recovery programs. Wow, that's so important. I mean, I'm just thinking about all the people I've met over the years who've had concussions, whether they were playing football, basketball, or
Yeah,
whatever was happening in their lives. He is the author of Brain Save and his new book, Leaky Brain Fix. He works with patients and private clients all over the world, both online and in person. He has a holistic brain center in California. You can learn more about him and the root cause to approaches that he takes, both in his books and through his talks. It's just an honor to be with you today. Thank you so much for being with us.
absolutely. Yeah, it's so good to connect with you. I know we've been meaning to do so for a while, so thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, it's really, really good. We're always curious about sort of the backstory, right? How did you even get into becoming a functional neurologist?
Yeah, so over 21 years ago, I was actually in a really bad car accident that nearly took my life. I was on my way home from work on my scooter and out of nowhere got hit by a car and I went flying and I ended up breaking 3 ribs, dislocating my shoulder, and I sustained a concussion. And so thankfully I was wearing a helmet and I survived, obviously, but I was left with chronic pain and all the debilitating symptoms from the concussion. And so I tried everything that I could within conventional medicine, but nothing worked. So I decided to go outside the box
Mhm.
and I got a postdoc in clinical neurology. I got a master's in nutrition. I studied chiropractic, acupuncture, and like what we were talking about before you hit record, all types of energy medicine modalities. And I'm so glad that I did because I was searching for answers. And along the way, through everything I learned in school and conferences, workshops, and all the scientific articles I was reading, I applied those things to my own brain. I was tinkering with my own noggin, and
Mhm.
thankfully, I was able to fully heal from that concussion. After many years of trial and error, after many years of struggle, I was able to do so holistically. And so that's why I do what I do, because I realize that although conventional medicine really shines when it comes to emergency care. So,
Mhm.
for example, when I got hit by that car, I am so grateful for the doctors and the nurses and the ambulance drivers that took me from the scene of the crime, so to speak, and
Mhm.
made sure that I was medically stable, right? But what I discovered was I was pretty much left at the curb after that to fend for myself and all these debilitating symptoms. So that's why I do what I do. I want to share this information to help people struggling with concussion so they don't have to go through what I did.
Absolutely. And I know you're doing such beautiful work with people with that. And yeah, whether it's an accident or they fell down, there's and have you seen a lot of like really interesting like accidents that cause concussion?
Actually, the most interesting things I've seen are, a lot of people think that you actually need to hit your head to sustain a concussion. But
Mm-hmm.
some of the most interesting ones I've seen are people who they've been on a roller coaster, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
they were riding a bicycle and they fell off and they didn't even hit their head. They might have landed on their shoulder or on their wrist, and then
Mm-hmm.
they developed a concussion. So what I've discovered is a lot of people are going through their lives with mystery brain symptoms sometimes, and they don't even realize that's because of a concussion. So that's some of the most interesting things, like mechanisms or injuries.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, being a brain expert, when it comes to concussion, the different types of symptoms can be so like completely different because depending on which area of the nervous system has been impacted. So yeah, it's been quite an interesting journey for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody's so biochemically different,
Mm.
right?
Oh
So it affects people differently for
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
exactly. And that's the thing. It's not, in a lot of the research that I've seen and what the actual scientific research supports is when you have a concussion, you can definitely obviously impact your brain and brain function and have symptoms like brain fog or light and sound sensitivity.
Mm.
But you can also have mental emotional symptoms like anxiety or depression, right? But on top of that, there's research shows that people who suffered a TBI or a brain injury, it can actually trigger what we call leaky gut and end up
Mhm.
creating digestive symptoms and all sorts of other body symptoms like autoimmunity, chronic fatigue, chronic pain. The list goes on and on. So that's what I found. I really believe that, concussion, it's a silent epidemic, that's impacting a lot of people, whether they realize it or not.
Oh, I like that silent epidemic. Yeah, yeah. On my biofeedback device, when I hooked somebody up, it's the one that had the wires that hook people up. I
Mhm.
use this in my office. There was a panel, and it would all of a sudden just like go to this panel, and it would show a picture of a skull like a brain.
Mhm.
And there's a way to scan it and actually help change the brain using neurobiofeedback. But whenever that panel came up, it was my clue as the practitioner to ask
Mhm.
that person if they ever had a concussion,
Yeah.
if they ever did
So
fall down, if something did happen. Then I would have to sort of like work with them differently and
yeah,
really
exactly.
clue in on that brain.
Yeah, it's a really different process when it comes, to things like concussion. It requires a special approach, just like you're saying.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Well, then so there is a gut brain relationship, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So I know that you have this book called Leaky Brain Fix. What is leaky brain? Just describe that.
Yeah. So leaky brain, I found it to be one of the most under-recognized root causes for people who don't recover from concussion. So there's actually statistics out there that 85% people that have a concussion recover within a few weeks or a month or two.
Mhm.
But then there's this unlucky 15%, and they develop what's known as post-concussion syndrome, where you have different types of brain symptoms after the original injury. And that was my situation. I was one of the unlucky 15%. And so through my research, as I was, investigating and experimenting with my own health, I discovered that one of the reasons why a lot of people didn't recover from concussion, at least my patients and clients, and in retrospect, why I wasn't recovering as, hoped for, was
Mhm.
because of leaky brain. And what leaky brain is where you have damage to this protective barrier that protects your nervous system from internal forces. So what I mean by that, all throughout our bodies, we have different barriers that protect us from the external world. So we have, for example, our skin barrier. We have the lung barrier. As you'd mentioned, we have the gut barrier. And
Mhm.
for our purposes in this conversation, we have what's known as the blood-brain barrier. Now, the blood-brain barrier, what it does is I said it protects our brain from internal forces.
Mhm.
So, as you know, Louise, being a brain expert, our brains really are what I believe to be the most sacred and precious organ, and also the most sensitive. And so we
Mhm.
have a hard skull to protect us from external forces, some thicker than others. Like that's
Yes.
what I've heard. Some people have thicker skulls than others, but that helps protect us from external forces. But then we also have this blood-brain barrier that protects us from internal forces. And so, for example, right now as we speak, there are toxins floating through our bloodstream, right?
Mhm.
There are inflammatory compounds and chemicals that we all have a certain degree. Now, the reason why the blood-brain barrier is so important is because it protects our brain from those chemicals and toxins and viruses and pathogens from
Mhm.
entering our nervous system. Because if those things could gain entry, then all heck can break loose and trigger a massive neuroinflammatory process and create brain damage. right? And so it becomes
Mhm.
this vicious cycle. So that's why the blood-brain barrier is so important, is because it's this single cell layer that protects us from these forces that are already within our bodies right now.
Do you think that some people have more of a leaky blood-brain barrier than others, like more sensitive? You know what
Oh
I
yeah,
mean?
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big part of what my book's about. But the interesting thing is, in my research, as I was healing my brain and bringing the discoveries I made about the blood-brain barrier to my patients and watching them get better,
Hmm.
what I discovered is that, there's trauma, obviously, is like physical trauma, like concussion, is one of the most common reasons why a person might develop a leaky brain. But there's other reasons too, and there's these other factors that can create a weakness of the blood-brain barrier. But the great news is that can heal, it can improve, right?
Right.
I mean, there's many different causes. Like I said, traumas, very
Mhm.
common. But did you know that even emotional trauma, like emotional stress, can actually trigger a leaky brain? So it's not like, obviously there's probably some genetic uniqueness, but it's the blood-brain barrier is a living tissue. So it's
Mhm.
it's it's plastic, meaning it can change. And so there's different factors that can either harm it or
Mhm.
heal it. And so that's what I've discovered is it's such an important yet under-recognized structure that's been implicated in not only, slow and painful recovery from a concussion like what I experienced, but it's also been implicated in virtually all chronic neurological disease, serious things such as Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, stroke, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is the end game of an untreated concussion, and much, much more.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. As you're talking, I'm thinking about what I do and how it relates to that blood-brain barrier. I clear the traumas in the spaces of the brain.
Mm,
So I actually
exactly.
believe, yeah, I believe that the emotional trauma, and I'm able actually intuitively to go in and find out what happened at age 6, what happened with great great grandma,
Mm,
target that time of the accident and release the trauma and the shock that got stuck in the space between the neurons,
mm,
the synapse, right? So
yeah.
that synapse, that space is where the neurotransmitters have to leap. And
Mm,
when they can't leap, that's because this is, I call it gunked up. Great
yeah.
scientific word,
Yeah,
right? It's
breakdown
gunked
of
up.
communication. Absolutely.
So it's the remembrance of that trauma, that
Mm,
accident, or whatever else for someone, and it can be emotional too. And when we
absolutely.
clear that out, I wonder if clearing that out actually repairs the blood-brain barrier. That's
I'm
kind of my
sure.
question. I'm thinking
Yeah.
it does.
Of course, yeah, because that's the thing is, the blood-brain barrier, even though it's a really fragile structure, it's one single cell layer thick, like thinner than a tissue piece of tissue paper.
Mhm.
It's a living, dynamic, like structure, right? And so it can heal, but what I've discovered is if there are these blocks to the healing process, that's when healing specifically with the blood-brain barrier, that's when people don't recover from their concussions. That's when people
Wow.
start to experience chronic mystery brain symptoms. And yeah, I'm sure when you do your processes to clear emotional trauma, that's going to help the blood-brain barrier then do what it is. It's natural and innate to it, which is healing,
Which is
'Cause I
healing.
firmly believe, and I know you share the same philosophy, being trained in naturopathic medicine. The body has a wisdom, right? It has the ability
Yes.
to heal. So it's our jobs as these detectives, right, to identify what are those blocks preventing our patients and our communities from healing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're so good at that. Why is it so important for brain health even beyond the concussions?
Yeah, so I alluded to that, a second ago through my research, because I specialize in concussion. And so a lot of my focus was on helping patients with concussion and also trying to figure out the hot mess going on in my own brain, right? When I was struggling with my concussion symptoms. And so I discovered a lot of different things. And one of the biggest things I kept getting drawn to was this blood-brain barrier. And
Oh,
so in
okay.
research, I discovered that not only did it impact people's concussion recovery, because it set up what I call a vicious cycle of inflammation. Because
Hmm.
when you have, for example, when you have damage, so looking back, I'm sure 21 years ago when I was hit by that car, I am 100% positive I developed a leaky brain. I just didn't know it. I
Uh,
didn't know anything about neurology or the brain at that time. But I am positive that I developed a leaky brain, and it probably somewhat healed a little bit, but not fully. And so I
mhm.
found myself stuck on this roller coaster of symptoms where I'd feel good one day and terrible the next, and I'd have no idea why. And again, through my research, I discovered one of the major reasons was because of leaky brain. That's why I wasn't recovering. I was part of that unlucky 15%.
Percent.
But through that research, the more I dove into the world of the blood-brain barrier and leaky brain, there's all this research that it was just the gateway to not only not recovering from a concussion. So you can have a leaky brain without having a concussion for, like I mentioned a second ago, emotional trauma from
Mhm.
the what we call leaky gut, where you have an imbalance in the gut-brain connection. You can
Yes.
develop leaky brain from exposure to toxins. So my point is, when the leaky brain is there, what I've seen in my clinical practice and what the research also supports is that it is the gateway not only for people who don't recover from concussion, but also for serious things like Alzheimer's, dementia, multiple sclerosis, and on and on. But one of the coolest things I think there's a lot of really interesting facts about the blood-brain barrier, but I stumbled across this research article where they were looking at patients who had MS, multiple sclerosis, which is a
Mhm.
neurological autoimmune disease, right? And
Mhm.
so people who have MS, they have different types of symptoms depending on which area of their nervous system's being like injured, right? But the point is, what they found was patients who had MS had leaky brain. It was pretty much
Uh-huh.
like, and
Yeah.
they found that it was like more so like this. When they developed leaky brain, that's when they started to develop MS. So again, this is like this gateway to all this
Oh,
neurological suffering, right? But
yes.
what I found, what was really fascinating for me, so just to kind of get a little technical, so like I said, MS is a neurological autoimmune disorder where
Mhm.
a person's immune system, which normally should be protecting a person from pathogens and different types of, things that can harm the body or nervous system, the
Mhm.
immune system gets confused and starts attacking its own tissues.
Right.
Right. And so in the case of MS, the tissues are neurological tissues.
Mhm.
So what the researchers found, not only did these patients who had symptoms and who were diagnosed with MS have leaky brain, they found when they began healing the leaky brain, the symptoms began to resolve. Right. And so
Yes.
what that speaks to is the importance again of the blood-brain barrier and protecting the nervous system from not only like like viruses and bacteria, but from your own body's compounds that could be harmful to the nervous system, pointing to the importance of a strong, healthy blood-brain barrier.
Wow. You know what? And as you're describing all this, see, they didn't know what I had. I had those diagnoses of MS,
Mm,
chronic fatigue,
yeah,
fibromyalgia. Doctors didn't know. So I was on my own and I had both. I didn't know about leaky brain, but I definitely had leaky gut.
yeah.
So I worked on healing my gut, but I had all of those symptoms. I was hypersensitive to lots of things, very chemically sensitive. I still have to kind of watch some of that.
Sure.
I'm much better, but I'm just smart now about what I do. But I had no idea what was happening to me. I was in my 30s. I mean, I wish I would have like found you then, right? Because I was on my own trying to figure it out.
Yeah, that's the most heartbreaking thing that I see. I think so many people go through their life with these, mystery symptoms that conventional medicine just doesn't have an answer for. And that I find it heartbreaking. And but the good news is, again, when you can identify what those root causes are, and I found leaky brain to be a really common yet just under-recognized one. I mean, I was
Hmm.
shocked, right, when I began researching this and learning more about it. I found that even a lot of neurologists never heard of it, or even if they heard of the blood-brain barrier, they didn't know what to do about it, you
Right.
know? So that's one of the reasons why I wrote my book, is to get this information out to the people that really who are out there struggling with these symptoms, because there is hope. But yeah, going back to just, I wanted to riff off of what you said about the leaky gut. And
Hmm.
that's such an important piece of the puzzle when it comes to brain health, but also specifically with leaky brain, because as you know, probably going through your whole, journey exploring that and healing the gut,
Hmm.
that the gut barrier is actually very similar to the blood-brain barrier. It's
Yes.
made up of these cells, and then these cells, they're connected together with these proteins that we call tight junctions, right? And so with leaky gut, as you know, what happens is the gut barrier, like you can imagine, it's like this wall, right, that
Hmm.
protects your gut from things coming in that shouldn't. And so when that wall starts to break down, and specifically what happens is those little tight junction proteins that act as like the glue or the nails that keep the wall together,
Uh-huh.
those tight junctions start to fall apart. And then from there, you can have an inflammatory process where the immune system, again, like we talked about earlier, it's
Hmm.
just surveying your body, looking for any damage to clean things up. The immune system can then launch an attack against your own gut barrier. But guess what? Those structures look very, very, very similar to the blood-brain barrier, meaning
Yes.
that if you have leaky gut, your immune system not only can further perpetuate the leaky gut, but it can then go upstream, up north, right?
Yes.
You can go
Yes.
up north, from New Mexico to California, and then start damaging, central headquarters, the AKA the blood-brain barrier. So yeah, there's a strong correlation, again, just like what we talked about earlier and what you discovered in your healing journey,
Mhm.
between the gut barrier and the blood-brain barrier. And that's actually funny you mentioned that, because a big part, I talk about this in my book, a big part of my healing journey from concussion, which was to heal my leaky brain, was to heal my leaky gut. Right?
Right.
Yeah, I did a
Yes.
test, I did a stool test, and I identified that I had a leaky gut, and due to actually a bacteria pathogen that's called H. pylori. It's one of the most common gut
Hmm.
infections in the world. I had this gut infection that I didn't even know about it, right? And so I did a stool test. I found I had like a terrible case of leaky gut. Point being, when I did a gut healing protocol using natural herbs and supplements and some diet changes, not only did my gut digestive symptoms get better,
Mhm.
my brain got better.
Yes.
It was like, I don't know, kind of like the sensitivity that you're describing. I really, I can't even just, it's hard to like describe it, articulate what I was actually feeling in my brain. It just felt like, kind of like electric, like really buzzy. And that space between something happening and then my ability to create a cushion between my reactivity, like being
Yes.
easily. Like
Hmm.
I remember when I had, prior to healing my gut, the leaky gut, yeah, I was just really reactive and irritable and angry. And when I healed my gut, those things improved. I was just like, oh my God, this was such an important piece of the puzzle. And again, I know a big part of it is when I healed my gut, overall body inflammation went down. But I also know that that contributed, allowed my blood-brain barrier to finally fully heal as well.
Right. We're whole people, right? When you heal
It's
one, and
all
then I always
connected.
think it's always brain, heart, gut,
Mm.
not the rest of the body too. We got to do the liver, we got to do all
Yeah,
that. But
exactly.
but
Yeah,
but
those are
yeah,
important ones.
there it's
Uh,
all important, but
heart
those are
and the
like the
brain.
three, that I think of, Yeah, I remember a doctor said to me when I was first, and there was no functional medicine doctors, and he was an osteopathic doctor, and he was awesome. And he said, "What? Well, you're not absorbing any amino acids. How are you walking around on the planet?"
Yeah.
So my gut was a total mess, and I was just at the beginning of learning all this. I was still, going to doctors like medical world and had to find the whole natural world.
Exactly.
But he was brilliant. He really gave me all these vitamins, and I remember I had to make my own little tryptophan powder things and capsules,
Mhm.
because they took that off the market here, so we had to order it from Germany.
Got it. Wow.
Yeah, it was like,
A little
yeah,
black market tryptophan the
yeah,
kit. I
it
love
was
it.
it was quite a journey. But yeah, I learned a lot from him, but it was all about healing my gut that did heal my brain.
So important. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. So we all have, and what do you do? So give us some tips, like how do you fix that leaky brain, leaky gut? What have you used with your patients?
Sure. So what I found, obviously, when it boils down to it, everyone's unique in what they need because there's, like I described earlier in this talk, but also in my book, there's different root causes and what I call the hidden forces that
Mhm.
prevent the blood-brain barrier from healing. So obviously you got to figure out what's right for you, got to figure out if you have a gut issue or toxins, so on and so forth. But I found that there is some foundational things that everyone can do to help not only heal their blood-brain barrier, but to actually strengthen it. And so if you do have
Nice.
stress or you are exposed to toxins, or God forbid you have a concussion, that the fallout won't be as serious, right? And the healing can
Right.
happen faster. So one of the number one things that I did to heal my brain and recommend to my patients is this nutrient called specialized pro-resolving mediators, or SPMs for short. Now,
Nice.
what SPMs are, so everyone obviously has heard of fish oils and omega-3 fats,
Mhm.
so crucial for brain health, right? Just like you talked about the synapses, like that, the ends of the neurons where they communicate with one another, really
Mhm.
high in what's known as DHA, docosahexaenoic acid. It's omega-3 fatty acids that's found in high amounts in fish as well as algae oil. So my point is, what SPMs are, they're actually a metabolic byproduct of these omega-3 fats. So the reason why I found them to be so effective is because, so just to geek out a little bit here. So again, we talked about how the synapses, like the areas where the brain cells communicate. And
Mhm.
again, to kind of step back even further, the quality of communication in your brain really dictates the quality of your life, right? The ability, because
Yes.
when your brain cells communicate efficiently, intentionally, and in a focused way, that's when we experience all the beautiful things that life has to offer, right?
Mhm.
Gratitude, joy, all the amazing emotions, as well as the ability to enjoy a gorgeous sunset, or, listen to music and actually have like this feeling, right? All the amazing things really boils down to, I believe, the communication happening between our brain cells.
Mhm.
So when that communication slows down, or that communication, there's a breakdown in communication, similar to what you talked about earlier with like the emotional trauma gunking things up.
Mhm.
When that happens, the communication becomes muffled, right? And then people can start to develop symptoms depending on which part of the brain. They can have things like anxiety, they can experience insomnia, they can have trouble focusing, or if an area of their nervous system called the hippocampus has a breakdown in communication, they can have memory issues. Point
Mhm.
being, so one of the most important things for efficient communication, omega-3 fats, and in
Oh, that's good
particular,
to know.
yeah,
Yeah.
DHA, docosahexaenoic acid. So now, going back to what I talked about before, the SPMs, this is where the SPMs come in. So normally, and I remember when I first learned about this in school, when we eat foods that are high in omega-3 fats, so things like wild caught salmon, or we eat things like seaweed, or we eat things like leafy green vegetables, our bodies break it down, take those fats, and then embed them into your brain cells in
Ah,
particular. So again, it's like the foods that we
yes.
eat. So but the thing is, right? So just to kind of summarize, because I know I kind of geeked out a bit there.
I love it.
When you have
That's
high
good.
levels of DHA, like this omega-3 fat, the communication in your brain is pretty fast, pretty smooth, and your brain works. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
But when your brain is inflamed, when you have inflammation or toxins,
Hmm.
what ends up happening, your brain and body, again, in its wisdom, it takes those fats and pulls them out of the brain cells. Why? Because it then converts them into this other compound to help put out the fire and clear out the toxins.
I see. Got
Make
it.
sense?
Yes,
And
it
so
does. Hmm.
and so it's a self protective mechanism. Like if you have inflammation, if you have exposure to toxins, your brain's going to take its own building blocks, pull them out, and then help put out the fire of inflammation in your brain, but at the expense of that communication, right?
Right,
So what I
right.
found is, but what the brain actually does, it converts them. That anti-inflammatory compound is what's known as SPMs. So like I
Okay.
said, the SPMs are a metabolic byproduct. Your brain changes those fish oils or those omega-3 fats into SPMs. So then
Hmm.
those SPMs have been shown in the research to be super potent natural anti-inflammatories. So I found when a person has leaky brain or brain inflammation, rather than giving them fish oils, which I do sometimes, or like
Hmm.
omega-3 fats, I give them the SPMs. We cut out the middleman. So
Ah,
then they
nice.
don't lose, yeah, they don't lose that beautiful communication happening within their brain. And they also get the anti-inflammatory effects to help facilitate and accelerate the healing process. So yeah,
I,
to
I
summarize,
love that.
yeah, one of the
Yes.
first things I do to help heal leaky brain is give this natural anti-inflammatory compound called SPMs, or specialized pro-resolving mediators.
Oh, I love this. I wrote that down because I have to know it. Okay. I I no, that makes total sense to me. And I always say that we all need fish oil, or we need the good fat, right? So it's the good
Absolutely.
fat for the brain. So I always think minerals, fish oil, probiotics, those are like the basics. Years ago I was working with a little boy with asthma, and just those three things took away his asthma was gone.
Boom,
Right. He
like
just
that.
needed nutrition. He just needed the right nutrition for his body. But I
Exactly.
love this SPMs. That's really, really, that's awesome.
Yeah,
And it makes
found
sense
that
to
to
me.
be a super fast shortcut. Yeah, I remember I had
Yeah.
a patient who had a concussion and he had all this brain fog and memory issues, right? And I had this initial evaluation with him and I took his history and we figured out, okay, he's got brain inflammation. And I'd order some lab tests, but while I was waiting for the lab test to come back, I put him on this foundational protocol, one of the supplements being SPMs. A few weeks later, right, I got on the call to go over his lab test results. He's like, yeah, I don't know what you did, or I don't know what happened, or how it worked. But a few days after I started the SPMs, it's like my brain fog dramatically decreased by like 85%. That one
Nice.
thing, that wasn't the only thing we did, but for him, it was like a really super potent thing and super helpful. And again, it's natural, because the problem with the like conventional or medication anti-inflammatories, a lot of them have side effects that can lead to gastrointestinal bleeding, right? And so it might
Mm-hmm.
help put out inflammation, but at the expense of these other things. The beautiful thing about SPMs is they don't come with those nasty side effects.
Right. Absolutely. Anytime you can use something natural, that's really beautiful. That makes total sense to me. And this isn't SPMs, but it's about fat.
Mm.
When I was super sick, I ended up in a sauna program. It was a
Mm.
medical sauna program.
Mm.
It was Dr. Lieberman in South Carolina. He was very good with chemically sensitive patients, and I was poisoned with mercury. So
Wow.
I had all my mercury out in one day, and I was really toxic with a lot of heavy metals. And so I went and spent 5 weeks sweating, literally sweating. But at the end of the day, so it's like 30-minute block, and then cold shower, 30-minute block all
Oh
day,
yeah.
all day,
Favorite.
all day. I mean, I taught myself foot reflexology. I met a lot of great people. I mean, you were basically just in the sauna all day. So at the end of the day, they'd have us take oil
Oh
to
yeah,
grab all of the chemicals.
exactly.
And so I still do that today. So when I get in a sauna, I have a sauna in my garage. I take glutathione, vitamin C, and niacin before I get in.
Hmm.
And then, I mean, drink a lot of water, stay super hydrated. And then when I get out, I take some oil.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love the fact that, yeah, you had that healing, and you worked with a great practitioner. But I love that what you just described, because I do very similar protocol too. I have
Uh-huh.
a sauna in my base downstairs. I mean, the first floor here, I have a sauna, and then what I love doing is doing the sauna and then sweating, taking some electrolytes and supplements, but then going into my shower and doing the super cold, like that contrast therapy. There's so much research, as
Yes.
to the benefits of that. But one of the things that, was so cool is those are these tools that help facilitate your healing and also mine. But these are things I continue to do, right? To take the brain to the next level and to
Right.
create resilience. Because as you kind of alluded to before, and I think it's such an important point, and I'm glad you mentioned it. It's healing is not a destination, right? It's a journey. And it was like
Yes.
all these different things that I experimented with and, tinkered with and tried out on my own health and brain. Like it wasn't like, I think a lot of patients come to me with this idea, think, oh, cure me of this thing, like, fix this thing or give me the magic bullet. And I understand, right? Because if you're struggling, you just want to feel better as soon as possible. I get it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've learned is it's a journey, right?
It
And
is.
so all the different things that I developed and the discoveries I made and the things I applied to my own healing were to build resilience, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
continue building this resilience. Because it's like when I got hit by that car, it's like the analogy I like to use is like I was in a ditch, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
physically, like I didn't fall in the ditch, but like a ditch in terms of my health, right?
Yes.
So just totally symptomatic in a ditch. And then when I started to feel better, right, the interesting thing is when you're out of the ditch, you don't have symptoms, right? But you can literally be at the cliff, right? Literally be at the edge of the ditch. So,
Mm-hmm.
so that's the kind of tricky thing. A lot of people think that once they're symptom free, that it's done, right? But what I found, and I know you use
Yeah.
testing as well, the testing is so important so then we can identify where are they actually at in that healing journey, because you can be symptom free and literally 1 inch away from falling back in the ditch. And so a lot of the things that I did, like what you're describing, it sounds like we had a similar
We
healing
did. We did. Yeah.
sauna with the cold therapy, resetting the nervous system, healing the gut, and facing the darker aspects of the psyche. That was part of my healing too, right?
Yes.
Like all those
Yes.
things were a continuous journey where each time I did something that was right for me, it was like boom, another layer of resilience was built, and I
Mm-hmm.
moved further and further away from the ditch. And so now, if things still happen, right? Obviously, life will happen, like stress happens. Sometimes I don't get a good night's sleep. In the past, when that would happen, I'd be right back in the ditch.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of the things that I experimented, not only that helped me get out of the ditch and heal from the concussion, it's like a continuous practice now. Like I do these things just to continue to build that resilience, to safeguard and protect my brain, but to also take my brain to a higher level, right?
A
To the
higher
next
level.
level, right? Through the miracle
Yes.
of neuroplasticity, right? Our ability to create these new connections, strengthen weakened connections. And so this miracle of neuroplasticity, not only it's really the foundation for my life's work, but not only when I was healing and in the darkest days of my concussion, but also even now where I'm trying to build, like what we talked about before hitting record, like
Yes.
improving, getting better, right, with our life.
Always. Yes, always getting better. And I know you're on a spiritual journey with this too. So let's talk a little bit about that. So what did you find, when even when you were in that ditch and climbing out of it, right? What did you find that fed you, like that fed your soul or your spiritual self?
Oh yeah. I mean, so I'll have to say that when I was at my darkest, it was being surrounded by a community of people that loved me, right? That were there for me
Mm-hmm.
mm, through it all, right? So I still get emotional about this because yeah, that was my anchor, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just being surrounded by people that, my family, my parents, they were there for me through it,
Mm-hmm.
without them, I don't even know where I'd be. So that was so important. And I think a big part of the spiritual journey of it too, for me, was just really embracing all aspects of myself, right? And I'm a work in progress, as we all are, but the darkest parts that came up in that journey, like not, well, how should I articulate this? Like shame was a big thing, I think, as part
Mm-hmm.
of the block to the healing, and
Mm-hmm.
really becoming aware of the shame and even embracing those aspects of myself and being okay that there was shame, right? First and foremost.
Right. Be
Yeah, right.
accepting. Yes.
Yeah, so self-acceptance, self-love, and and yeah, I mean, just a lot of grounding in nature and just really creating space, because I found for like I have a tendency when like stuff gets uncomfortable to overwork, right? I have this
Okay.
tendency where that's kind of like my drug,
Uh-huh.
So so I found a big part of the spiritual part of my healing was creating space, right?
Yes. Yes.
For sitting in that discomfort, like no matter how uncomfortable or how painful it was, like to sit in it and be okay with it, right? But
Yes.
but I had to be aware. It's like these things are happening. I'm using these, overworking or substances as a way to bury it. And
Mm-hmm.
so a big part of that healing for me was to, number one, become aware of these really self-sabotaging behaviors I had.
Mm-hmm.
And so become aware of that and then be able to sit in the discomfort. And then through that process, it was creating a space, and the healing just then came. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's really
No,
hard.
it's
I
really
don't have a
beautiful.
step-by-step program
Yeah, no,
that,
I think
right?
that's wonderful. Titus, that's beautiful. Because I remember I had one of my first clients had breast cancer, and
Mm,
she went to China to
mm,
spend some time with a shaman, with a healer
wow.
there. And
Mm,
she came back and she said, what I learned is, and what he kept saying is, we heal in the spaces.
yeah.
And you're talking about space right now. And yes, we all need space. I'm in New Mexico now. I'm from Chicago, but when I moved here, I
Oh,
was like,
Chicago.
there's are you from Chicago? Oh,
Yeah,
we got to talk even longer,
yeah. We
man.
got it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So you're in New Mexico. Yeah, I've
Wow.
been there. Like I told you, the
It's
vastness out.
it's
Yeah,
space, right? It's this big blue sky. So when I got out here, I'm like, the sky is like bigger than the land. Like, how does that happen?
yeah,
And it's just all this beautiful space. And so I believe we heal in the spaces, but also the spaces of the brain.
yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
what you're doing when you sit in it, in that uncomfortableness,
Yeah. And I
right?
love the fact that you said that, the spaces and the spaces in the brain, because like what research shows and what my own embodied experience is, like physical spaces influence and impact our nervous systems,
Of
right?
course.
When
Yeah.
we're in these busy cities or even in our own homes, if there's just a lot of stuff, or and obviously the best example is that like social media and things like that. It's like it's not physical stuff, but it's still stuff coming at us. There's no space. There's no space to
Right.
sit in the discomfort. There's no space for healing and just to slow down. And I find, again, I firmly believe when we can do that and just create the space and
Yes.
just slow down, that's when it just, for me at least, that's when the answers came, right? That's when the
Yes.
inspiration came, and the healing and the insights and the aha moments. It doesn't matter what I've learned in my journey and working with patients. It doesn't matter if you have the best supplement protocols, if you have the best treatment therapies, whatever it is, like you're doing. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a trap I see. I was guilty of, and a trap I find a lot of people get stuck in when they're on a healing journey. They want to get there as soon as possible. Again, I totally get it. You want to feel better. And
Sure.
so, when I was going through that, I was just putting so much energy and effort and
Yes.
doing all the things, right?
Uh-huh.
And there's actually a scientific explanation why that doesn't work for healing, right? You have to, it's just like there's a part of the brain we call a neural network called the central executive network, which is all about focused concentration and mental effort, right? And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we got to do things like that. We got to adhere to different protocols. We got to, go through this. We got to juggle our health and all that stuff. It's a lot. But what I've learned is, and again, it was funny when I read about it later, there's scientific support for this. There's another neural network called the default mode network, and that's a neural network that is all about space, and it's all about
Nice.
integration and about like aha moments, like insight. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
healing really is, in my opinion. It's like this epiphany you have, your nervous system has, but it's not going to happen when our minds are just in overdrive, right? And so,
Right.
yeah, I love the fact that, you know, this you describe this in New Mexico and the space, because those physical spaces very much impact the mental, emotional, as well as the nervous system spaces as well.
Yes, they certainly do. I mean, and we all know what that feels like when you get out in nature, whether it's the woods, like along the beach, I mean, and we're in space, right? And
Yeah,
we're relaxed.
exactly. And that's, you hear about like I think a lot of people could probably relate to this. If you're working on like a problem and you're stuck with something, and then a lot of times I hear people say, "Oh yeah, when I take a shower, it comes to me," right? Or I'm sitting under the tree and the apple falls on my head. Boom, I have the insight. But that's actually what happens when you have that space. So this concept doesn't apply just to healing, but it also applies to like these aha moments, like these moments of awe and inspiration. And I love the fact that you said nature, because nature has been shown, like I know for me, it just triggers awe, and it just immediately shifts us into that neural network of integration,
Mhm.
creativity, insight, and healing.
Yeah, that's where I go. I hike in the mountains here. That's my happy place.
Oh
That's
my
where I
God.
get my creative little downloads and and everything. Yeah, absolutely. And when I
Yeah.
don't do it for a while, it's like, oof, man, I gotta go. I just can feel
Yeah,
it.
the gunk,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
gunk starts to
Yeah.
build up.
Um,
I feel you.
I can feel it. Oh, this has just been so amazing. I so appreciate you being with us today. And I know you also have a quiz that people can take. Yes, so we'll put the
Yeah,
link here. Yeah, is it what's
yeah,
it the leaky brain quiz, right?
yeah. Leaky brain quiz. So I developed the quiz after many years of researching the blood-brain barrier, and it's a free quiz that you can take if any of what we talked about resonated with you today in our talk. Leakybrainquiz.com, and you can check your risk factor for leaky brain.
Yes. Oh, that's so awesome. And I just did that quiz. It's really good, you guys. You got to do it. It's really, really good. This has been so delightful. Hey, what brain tip would you leave if you were going to leave our audience here with one brain tip? What would it be?
So the number one brain tip, again, I would go back to what I said, create space, because I know how easy it is to get caught up in our lives in the
Hmm.
day to day with all our obligations, especially if you're dealing with some chronic health issue. I understand it's a lot to mentally juggle your health and try to manage and coordinate it. So one of the number one things I could recommend for people is to go to New Mexico
Visit
and
Louise.
visit Louise, go on a hike in the mountains. But if you can't yet, right, bookmark that for the future. Take a walk through the park, right, with no goal in mind, no attachment to anything, just meander. I found that to be one of the most powerful ways of creating that space that we talked about.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Oh, it's been such a delight to be with you today. Would you mind doing like round two with this at some point? I feel like we got to get back on a call. We still have lots to talk about.
So yeah, I would love to do round two with you. Maybe we can do it. Yeah, maybe I'll book that flight and we can do it in the mountains.
Oh, that would be so,
Around.
oh, that'd be so
That'd
awesome.
be pretty cool.
That would be very, oh, yes, definitely come see me. Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great. Oh my gosh, this has been so wonderful, Titus. So thank you, Dr. Titus, for being with us today. And remember, everyone, follow your heart, but take your brain with you.
Awesome.